Okay, welcome back to another episode of Shadows and Ink. And today our guest is John Ward, and we're going to be talking about his middle grade horror series, Scareville. And I'm going to let him introduce himself, so take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's John Ward. I am the author and creator of the Scareville book series. Just started releasing them with Crystal Lake here back in February. I did originally self-publish this middle grade horror series, and when I saw Joe reaching out, or not reaching out, when he posted about starting up a kids branch to Crystal Lake, I immediately reached out and introduced myself and what I do, and he was definitely interested to partner with me. So yeah, definitely excited to be here today and discuss more.
Okay, so how did you get started in writing, and what's the journey been like so far?
Yeah, great question. I've been writing since I was young, like young age, and I was always told I had a knack for it. But as you get older, you kind of, when you get to high school, you're told you either need to go to college or get a job. So I kind of drifted away from my passion that was writing and started focusing more on work and all those different things. And I did a little bit of college time as well, but um, once I got there, I've bounced around from a fair amount of jobs and just realized I've never truly been happy. And a couple of years ago, I was out at a local park because nature helps clear my head. And I was sitting there brainstorming. I love horror, right? I've always loved horror from a young age, and I found myself kind of trying to brainstorm how I could get into the horror space. And I'm standing out on this boat dock uh, out in the park, and I turn around and I see this library that's sitting up on the hill, and I had my aha moment of I'm going to write horror, and started to sit there and think, I'm like, what kind of horror could I write that I would be super ecstatic and excited to dive into. And I thought back to when I was reading Goosebumps at a young age and how excited I was to grab those books and to read horror. And I wanted to bring back that excitement to young readers of today's age. So I immediately thought of middle grade horror, and the floodgates opened. And I don't know, I've probably got 50 plus story ideas I could feasibly write as of today. Yeah, I just got busy with brainstorming, trying to put together like a series title, and landed on Scareville. So that's kind of where I got my start in writing. I'm glad I picked it back up though.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about the Scareville series. How's the reissuing going, and how do you see it evolving? And do you have any upcoming book secrets you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So the re-releases are going well. We had a couple of small issues with my illustrator that I worked with on the first 7 book covers, as far as communication goes, to get things ready for the relaunches. But we're working through that. We got through it. I know we've launched, or I should say, relaunched Welcome to Scareville, and they're getting ready to relaunch How to Create a Monster now. And then in April, it's going to be the 3rd book, which is Monsters of Mount Hope, which we're working through edits right now as well. So the plan is for Crystal Lake to relaunch 1 book a month until we're caught up. I do have the 8th book that has not yet been released. That will be the first official new launch from Crystal Lake. That'll probably be coming sometime in the late summer. And here's the little secret: that book is called Food to Die For, and it's going to be a creepy clown story, which I'm really excited for.
Oh, yes, and I'm sure there was a groan from some of the people in the audience with creepy clowns. We all know how people love clowns.
Oh, 100%. It's a staple in horror for sure.
Yeah. So, what was the original inspiration behind the story of Scareville? I know you mentioned Goosebumps, but what else?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, honestly, Goosebumps is the only middle grade horror I've ever read. Even up to this day. Like I've had Joe ask me in the past, like if I had any other authors that I read in the middle grade space, and I told him no. And the reason for that is because obviously I respect what R.L. Stein was able to do, but I don't want any other outside influences impacting my writing style. Like I want people to be like, this is similar to Goosebumps, but it's John's writing style, and I don't want other influences kind of impacting that and shifting it around, because I do think my style is unique and enjoyable for the readers. But um, and I'm sorry, I think may have forgotten the second half of your question there.
I said, what was the inspirations behind Scareville?
Yeah, yeah. So the inspiration behind the series is honestly just trying to create creepy stories for young readers. Now, with Welcome to Scareville, which was the first book of the series, I wanted it to be somewhere local ish to where I grew up, being in Northeast Ohio. But I wanted to try to come up with a fun coming of age, fun adventure, but still have a spooky aspect to it. And so I came up with a store owner opening up a store that sells all creepy and unusual things. And the kids notice something's wrong with the store owner. And then they kind of just go into investigation mode to see what's going on. But all in all, I wanted it to be like almost like an adventure that people would have fun writing along with and add intrigue and mystery and all that kind of stuff. But as far as inspiration goes, I honestly, it just comes straight from my brain. And I wish I had a better answer for it. I see these stories in my head like a movie and jot them down on a whiteboard and get to writing. So
That's cool.
yeah.
So you mentioned clowns coming up. So what are some of the classic tropes you've used in the Scareville series, like clowns, and what kids and parents expect when reading the books?
Yeah, awesome. So typically, I tried to do something unique with each story. However, there are classic tropes like creature features. That's a big part of my series up to this point. Ghost story is already part of it, and I try to write these stories in a way that is like a unique creature to mine. Even though maybe some of the myths and lores around some of these creatures, like uh, the story that's called "Don't Go into the Woods at Night." There's supposed creatures like those, but I tried to spin it in a way that would be exclusive to Scareville. But yeah, creature features, ghosts. I have plans for an eventual doll story, just all kinds of stuff that you've kind of seen happen, but written in a unique way for my readers.
Okay, so what types of themes and ideas have you explored in the Scareville books?
I guess what do you mean by themes? I just want to make sure because I don't know if that falls under the tropes thing or.
Well, like what kind of ideas have you explored underlying themes of what
Hmm.
something that would be relevant to children, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've tried like the trope of be careful what you wish for. That was in How to Create a Monster, which was basically a little artistic girl who was missing how Halloween used to be. It was supposed to be a scary holiday, and now she sees everybody, dressing in cute and silly costumes, and she wants it to be scary. That's how she was raised. So she drew up a monster that she thought the spirit of Halloween would look like, and she wished that it would come to life and wreak havoc on people that don't take Halloween seriously. So be careful what you wish for was a theme for that one. And then like with Don't Go into the Woods at Night, that was more or less a lesson on don't steal, because the opening of the book, the two main characters got caught trying to steal baseball cards. So they got sent to this camp that goes out to the woods and basically is like a not a reform camp, but for troubled youth to try to improve their behavior and stuff like that. And that's when these monsters start scaring them and having things happen. But different themes like that. I try to have some form of a life lesson in there in each of the books as well. So
Okay, so as a writer, what appeals to you about horror aimed at middle grade readers?
honestly, it's just stemming from my excitement for it when I was a kid. So, we had the scholastic book fairs when I was in, grade school, middle school, all that kind of stuff. And I always remembered seeing these bright, vibrant covers from Goosebumps and just being super excited to go grab, one or two of them at each one. And I couldn't read them fast enough. I couldn't get them fast enough, I should say. But like I said, I wanted to bring back something that felt very similar to that, but in a modern way as well. I think being able to foster a love for reading from our young readers is not only super important, but also good for them because it enables them to have their imaginations run wild and get them off their laptops and their tablets and their phones and all that kind of stuff. So I think just being able to create an atmosphere of reading and absorbing content that way is good for our future. So
Okay, so what appeals to you as a writer of horror? What appeals to you as a writer about horror in general?
yeah, I mean, it's just I don't even know how to explain it to be honest, but my head is, I guess, happier in the horror space. I know there's scientific reasons for that, like I know, like being scared in a safe manner, right? Actually releases endorphins in people, which makes people feel good and happy. Now, obviously, if it's legitimate fear and you're fearing for your life, that's a little bit different. It's not necessarily going to make you feel great, but that's another reason why I like enjoy writing in the middle grade space. Is you're going to be safe at the end of all of it, but um, just having that fun fear is a fun place to write in. But yeah, I like all things spooky, creepy. I mean, I know you can kind of see the Ouija boards behind me and stuff, but I've got a room dedicated to a bunch of creepy antiques, and I have all kinds of horror movies and books that I digest pretty frequently, and it's just fun for me. I like getting that startle scare. I like feeling unsettled with reading and writing, and with watching movies too. So.
Okay, so what are the challenges of writing horror for a middle grade audience?
I mean,
I'm
writing it
assuming
can be
there are things you can't do.
yeah. So like being able to figure out how scary to make the books. I don't want to ever push them too far, but I also don't want them to read as not horror, like almost like a thriller, which for kids or whatever. I want it to be still spooky enough to be scary, but not scary enough to where parents are like, why is my child reading this? I think that's a difficult line to cross. I will say the first three books in my series are probably a little more on the mild end of horror because I wasn't sure how hard to push things. Didn't get any complaints. I ramped up the horror a little bit more on the later books. Again, I've gotten no complaints now. I'm not going to push them any farther than what I have for those ones, but I know where I need to be at as far as honing that in now. Um, but yeah, I think the biggest struggle for writing a middle grade horror is definitely finding the balance of how hard to push the horror aspects. So.
Okay, so the series revolves around the mysterious horror themed stores you mentioned, and I'm assuming it's got a Halloween feel to it. So is Halloween a favorite holiday of yours?
Oh, Halloween is absolutely a favorite holiday of mine. I both Halloween and Christmas are like 1A and 1B for me, but I remember back to when I was a kid and just seeing all the Halloween decorations that people would put up. And my family, we took a lot of we were one of the first families in the area that did those pumpkin masters carving books and stuff. So people from all over would come to our house and see our pumpkin carvings, and so just everything about Halloween I've always loved and enjoyed. It's just again, it's a fun space. I love the color schemes. I love the costumes. I love the scares, all that kind of stuff. Haunted house attractions, all of it. So definitely one of my favorite times of the year, and just seeing the leaves changing color. It's just, I don't know. There's something magical about that time of the year. So
Yeah. So do you have a Halloween costume that sticks out for you as a kid?
honestly, I so there were a few. One of them was one of the times it was a silly costume that I, looking back now, I wish I wouldn't have. It was like a ninja one year. I think I was a vampire, Dracula vampire, whatever you want to call it, at least 3 or 4 times. Then I graduated to buying creepy masks and having just outfits based on the masks and stuff. But I would say probably my Dracula costumes were my favorite as a kid. So.
Yeah, I think we've all dressed up as a vampire at least once as a child, because I
You
know
have
I
to. It's
did.
a rite of passage, and they have like that little red candy blood that you streak on the outsides of
Yeah.
your lips, and yep,
Yeah, and those vampire teeth were painful.
absolutely, yeah, yep.
Okay, so what's a typical writing day like for you? And what do you do for relaxation and fun?
Well, right now it's a little difficult because writing is not my full time job yet. I'm hopeful one day that that will come. So right now I still have my normal day job, and then I try to write, in the evenings and on the weekends and such. But yeah, just depending on how much time I've got available, it may be 2 to 3 hours on a weekend, or excuse me, on a weeknight, and then anywhere from 6 to 8 hours on a Saturday where I'll spend writing to get those books done. As far as rest and relaxation goes, honestly, relaxation for me is writing. I enjoy doing it. I actually get excited after I finish writing for the day, and I'm hyped up about whatever I'm writing. But I do paranormal investigating as well. I love to travel, take nature walks, all that kind of stuff when I can. But yeah, the day in the life of a writer is pretty simple. And now, if I was doing it full time, it'd be a little bit different, obviously. But I will say one thing that is important for writers in particular is you got to make sure you read as well. So I read a lot of horror books during my downtime also.
Okay, so you mentioned paranormal investigation. What's the scariest investigation you've ever done?
Oh God, that could be a number of different things. I would say the scariest place that I've been. I would say probably it's called Madison Seminary in Madison, Ohio. It's been a number of different things over the years. It was originally a place for women that lost their husbands in the Civil War, and then it became a school. And then it was also an insane asylum at one point. A lot of different history to that building, but it's always active and pretty creepy there. So I would say I've had some pretty unsettling experiences there as well. But I've been all over Ohio, Indiana, Virginia, New York, Vermont for investigations. So
Cool. So, what's your process for creating characters? Do they begin with as a name, an idea, or do they talk to you?
yeah, it's kind of all of the above, to be honest. So like I said, I see these stories like a movie in my head, and as it's playing out. But I'll just based on what I'm seeing in my head, I'll create just names off of that. So if I see a group of four friends and one's a girl and two of them are boys and the main character's a girl, whatever, I'll just come up with random names for those characters that I think fit those characters. And then obviously from there, I'll kind of dictate which one has which personality and are they funny? Are they, a scaredy cat? Are they the leader? That sort of stuff. Um, but I always whiteboard everything out with the characters, and I'll list out everything from their parents, what their parents' occupations are, um, just based on things that'll fit the scope of the story, who my antagonist is, what their end goal is, all that sort of stuff. So I pre-plan everything with that for sure.
Okay, so of all the books you've written, do you have one that stands out for you as a favorite or a particular achievement?
Yeah, so I think my favorite overall in the series is probably it's going to be the fifth book of the series, which is called Got Ghosts, and that one's special to me because of my background in paranormal investigating. And I wanted to be able to do the paranormal field justice with that, but still be able to make it a super spooky story. And I've had a lot of readers tell me that that's the scariest one in the series, and a lot of them it's their favorite as well. But I I wrote that story in a way where I could almost create my own Conjuring verse. So anybody that's watched The Conjuring is familiar with how the Warrens had their own room with haunted dolls and all this stuff, haunted items, cursed items, all that stuff. I kind of created a similar, I guess, background in that within that Got Ghost story where I could do spin-off stories for Scareville based on the items that they had and their origin stories that I could write too. So there's a lot going on with Got Ghosts in it. I wrote it to be the scariest one of the series thus far on purpose. I wanted it to stand out on its own and be a memorable story. So that's probably my favorite so far.
Okay, so when you do have a problem when you're writing a story and you run into some difficulties, how do you work through it? What's your process?
So with Scareville, my go-to process has always been going out to the park, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, hot, cold. I go out there. Nature is my best advocate as far as getting my brain to clear out. And I'll pace and I'll walk and I may message a friend and send a voice message just to talk things out and say where my brain is at with something. And even if they can't help me break loose that log jam, even just talking about it and hearing their idea might create a spark in my mind that clears it up, that'll fit, right? So there's a couple of friends that are fellow authors that I confide in from time to time, to help me get through those times. But definitely going out in nature and having that quiet, don't look at my phone other than if I'm messaging someone, don't scroll on social media, just focus on the problem, and get it sorted out, because writing a story is a lot like putting together a puzzle, and you want to make sure all the pieces fit. So I do my due diligence as far as making sure there's no plot holes, and if I run into a plot hole, what do I got to do to plug this guy up and create a bridge to keep the story moving? So
Definitely those pesky plot holes.
yep, yep.
Okay, so who are some of your personal writing inspirations or your favorite writers?
Yeah. So obviously, at a young age, R.L. Stein was my favorite. I idolize him. I look up to him now, and I hope and aspire to have even a fraction of whatever success he had in writing. But as far as adult horror, that's what I read now for the most part. I love William Peter Blatty. He wrote The Exorcist, Legion. The Exorcist is by far my favorite horror novel of all time. But Other writers that I really look up to, Philip Fracassi. He's written things like Boys in the Valley and Gothic. Those are two of my favorites. Paul Tremblay, I read A Head Full of Ghosts, really enjoyed that. And then there's some indie authors as well. Felix Blackwell, who wrote Stolen Tongues and The Church Beneath the Roots. Those are a couple of my favorites. And then Nick Roberts and Ben Young are a couple other ones that I really enjoy to read in the indie space. So I've got quite a few authors that I love to read, but I'm always branching out and reading others as well. So like right now I'm reading Memorials by Richard Chismar.
So what are some of your favorite horror books? You mentioned The Exorcist.
Yeah, so The Exorcist, like I said, is my all-time favorite. It just, even the fact that it was written over 50 years ago and it still reads like a modern horror novel and it still has that same effect, it's going to stand the test of time. That's to me, that's the ultimate goal as a writer, is to have something that relevant even 50 years later. It's fantastic. But Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell, it had some issues as far as the plot goes, but it was the first book I ever read that made me feel uneasy and unsettled at nighttime, like in the dark. And I've never had that from a book before, so that earned it major bonus points for me. So Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell, for that reason, is one of my favorites. Home by Ben Young is one of my favorites, and then yeah, I would say Gothic or Boys in the Valley from Philip Fracassi are also up there.
Okay, so do you read anything else besides horror? I'm curious.
So I did in middle school. I read a lot of fantasy when I was in middle school. I read Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, all that kind of stuff, Harry Potter, and I don't remember the name of these books. It was, I think it was written by Patricia Briggs, but it was a middle grade fantasy series that she wrote, and I really enjoyed those. And then obviously I've read other things that were required in school that I enjoyed. One of my favorite poems in high school was The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And I can't remember who the author of that poem was, but that really resonated with it. It read kind of like a story, but it was still considered a poem. And I really, that impacted me in a great way. And I still enjoy it. So, but yeah, I'll read pretty much anything, but horror is my main focus, even to this day. But there was a time period where I read a lot of fantasy for sure.
Well, that's nice to know because I write fantasies.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So, do you have any other projects on the horizon besides Scareville?
Yes. So I'm actually about halfway through writing my debut adult horror novel, which I'm going to be trying to pitch to Joe and Crystal Lake once it's done as well. That horror story is going to be called A Blackened Heart, A Blackened Soul. It's going to be a kind of a cross between grief horror and like a paranormal possession horror story. And it's going to be a very bleak and terrifying book. I've had some alpha readers from other authors that are reading it, and everybody's had nothing but amazing reviews for it, and they're telling me to hurry up. But life's been getting in the way of getting that done. But that's the current focus on top of other things I'm working on within Scareville too. So
Good. Sounds like we got a lot to look forward to.
yeah.
And again, out of curiosity, would you ever consider writing anything besides horror?
Mm, maybe. I think I could write fantasy. I think I could probably do well in that space because I've read fantasy in the past and I've loved watching fantasy movies and stuff like that. I probably could. But right now, I've got so much on my plate within the horror side of things that if I ever did, it would be a while, I would say.
Mm, definitely. So, I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I always love discussing all things horror books in general. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and be sure to check out the Scareville books, people, and his upcoming adult horror when he gets it done. And that's it for this episode. And bye for now.